What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Tuesday again. Can you believe that happens every single week? And so as a result, we're about to get tactical and talk about some Warhammer 40,000. Hope everyone's psyched for chilling out this week. I think it's a good one. We are up to top 4 for the T5S2 Invitational. That's happening this weekend. That top 4 cut, which is very exciting. We have lots of data from over the weekend to talk about Nephilim. A new edition of War Machine and Hordes was announced briefly before we went live, so many things to discuss today. I'm going to do a video on that last one, so we'll we don't have to talk about that one. But if anyone's interested, I would be happy to exposit about the old War Machine and Hordes, but I don't know, maybe not today. How's it going, everybody in chat, though? Hope everyone's having a good one. Pashot 30, did I say I was mentioning Grim After Dark? I'm gonna expose my ignorance here, but I'm not familiar with that show, so I did not see that I was mentioned on it. So I guess I hope it was all good, and Grim After Dark, we're also mentioning you back. So there you go. Back at ya. Pew. You people over there. Yeah, anyway. Lots of stuff to go over. Nargo Man in chat. Dropping some some sweet rhymes, I guess. not entirely sure what's going on over there, but you know. Nargle Man, I hope you're having a good time. So I played a tournament this weekend. We can talk about that one real quick. It was actually a really good tournament in terms of gameplay, so which is a little bit ironic because I actually didn't take that many pictures because the games were actually super duper intense. So that's my bad. It may not be the most interesting discussion ever, but we can hopefully get through it and glean some useful information. Lyle, hope they can reclaim the players that they lost when they moved to 3rd edition. Yeah, so that's a big push of the, at least their initial announcement, a big push of what they're trying to do is like make it more accessible for people moving back in. They have like it's basically like a full restructuring of the game. They're discontinuing almost their entire line, and they're like moving to a new production format. And so there'll be formats where you can play the original legacy models, but for the most part, moving forward, the game's gonna be like entirely new models and stuff. So it's actually a little exciting for me because I sold all my stuff when I got out of that game. I think I have a Crix Army that's new in box. It's super old, and nobody wanted to buy it, so it just ended up sitting in a box for ages, and that's all the models that I own. So I could see myself forking over a couple $100 to buy back in with a new army, not have to worry about like scrounging for models that aren't manufactured anymore or something like that, which is a real problem with that game. So I don't know. Hopefully it's okay. I'm definitely going to do a whole video on it. I'll probably record that. I believe that they're previewing mechanics tomorrow, so I'll probably put that one live tomorrow or maybe later this week. But I have a ton of content scheduled for this week, by the way, chat. Oh my god, so much going on. I just spent all morning scripting out a new video. I'm super excited. We're going to talk about basic tactics. We're going to talk about some fight phase stuff. I have an advanced tactics video coming for people who are YouTube channel members or Twitch or patron members, and I'm just been like nose to the grindstone, chat. So hopefully you're ready for that. Hope you've enjoyed my shorts as well. I've been doing a bunch of shorts just about every day. I didn't do one today because I was a little busy with other stuff, but basically every day I've been doing shorts and a little TikTok, and those have been doing pretty good. They took off on TikTok, but then they kind of fell off, and then they took off again on YouTube. So I don't know. It's been an interesting ride. I've been having a good time. But let's talk about some Warhammer 40,000. How does that sound, chat? I figured today what we would talk about is a little bit less focusing on, hence the title of the video, but a little bit less focusing on the lists in particular, although there are some kind of standout lists from odd factions that we haven't really covered on the show recently, so we can talk about those a little bit, but a little bit more as a holistic view of the metagame and where things stand, because I think we're on the precipice of 40k being in a good spot. but it needs like one more push. we need to fix a couple things, and then we're good to go. I thought War Machine Hordes is essentially dead. Aren't they working on a different game? They have. I mean, the Privateer Press makes a bunch of different games, so yeah, you know, it is what it is. Isn't it illegal to have terrain on 40 mil bases? It's weird. So this is the events that I play at in my area almost exclusively use US Open layout terrain. And for the US Open, which is Games Workshop, which is ironically, I guess, Games Workshop's official terrain layout for their US Open competitive events, they clarify that the no terrain on objectives is it's sort of like the Pirates Code from Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's like more like a guidelines anyway. So it's basically stipulated in their event packets that terrain can be placed on the objectives, or the objective can be within terrain, defensible terrain specifically in this case for this format only, but with the implication that like they realize that rule's stupid and you could probably get rid of it and it wouldn't do anything. So technically yes, but Games Workshop said like, I don't know, it's fine, we're just gonna ignore our own rule, which is, you know, that's how they go. That's I don't know. That's Games Workshop's whole deal. So there it is. But with the US Open layouts, we do have these sort of huge bricks of obscuring terrain here, and it would be very difficult to place those in a way that they would actually be useful and not be intersecting with the position of the base, the 40 millimeter circle inside the objective marker. So, you know, we didn't really worry about that too much. You kind of gotta take what you can get, I guess. But yeah, I can talk about my tournament real quick, and then we'll move on to some more metagame stuff. I played my High Fleet Kraken list. I was kind of mulling over whether I should get a little bit more creative and play something different, and I was almost like, maybe I should like join the dark side and play High Fleet Leviathan. Unfortunately, I am kind of working on some other armies right now, so I can do some stuff that's not just Tyranids, but that is quite a ways off. Those are big undertakings. Tempest of War allows objective markers to be put on terrain. You know, chat, I tried to get a copy of Tempest of War so hard, and I couldn't find one anywhere in my local area, because I kind of want to give it a go. I want to give Tempest of War a playthrough. It sounds really cool. It's like a super cool idea for a format, and I cannot freaking find it, which is unfortunate. Maybe I should look harder, but I don't know. Problem is not being, it's not player place terrain. Predetermined terrain is bad. We disagree strongly there, Mr. Michael. I don't think player place terrain has any, belongs in 40k. So we can agree to disagree, I guess. I think terrain is too important in 40k to give players control over it. I think it's too impactful in the outcome of the game ultimately, if players are able to set up their own terrain. But anyway, I played my High Fleet Kraken list that I normally like to play. I've been playing it for the last couple of weeks. I haven't really changed it that much. I ended up, I have. You can find the link to the list in the description. Also, ! list in chat will get you there. It's on Wahapedia. Is it? Hot damn. No way. Have I just never looked at it? Wahapedia, what a gem. Oh, it is. They put it next to the GT pack. What? Oh, and it has like a card drawing thing too? Oh my god. Wahapedia. That's incredible. Okay, well, I'm gonna maybe I'll play some Tempest of War on stream, chat. That sounds good. I didn't stream yesterday. Normally I stream weekdays. I didn't stream yesterday, but because I was really wiped out, but I'm probably gonna be live tomorrow. Maybe we'll play some Tempest of War. I do want to give another go to 60 Tactical Marines though. So, I don't know. We're gonna play some fun stuff on stream in the lead up to the Invitational anyway. So yeah. Anyway, my list is High Fleet Kraken. It has a bunch of warriors in it. It has some Raveners. It has 2 units of Zoanthropes, which is sort of the weirdness that I've been playing. So 1 and 2, as well as 2 Neurothropes, and that's mostly because I think, in my opinion, Mortal Wounds are super valuable right now between Necrons and Heretic Astartes. all being good. Mortal wounds are just like incredibly powerful. All of the Space Marines are coming back in a big way, and mortal wounds are good against them. So I was like, we'll just windmill slam these double zoanthropes in there. Originally, I was like 2 neurothropes to give the healing to the zoanthropes and more synaptic lures, but then I was like, wow, we should probably resonance barb one of them and just farm CP off of psychic interrogation. So that was also the game plan too, and the list has been working like a treat. I lost one game last week, but other than that, it's mostly hasn't lost that too many times. Ash beat me one time on stream, which is unfortunate. And occasionally I give away my Hive Tyrant awkwardly, but that, whatever. Who cares about that? Let's talk about the games. So round one, I actually paired up against Colin from US Army Esports, who's actually been on stream when we stream live in here pretty often because he's a relatively local guy, and we always have pretty good games. And this is a pretty wild one. He's playing Bloody Rose, Adeptus Sororitas. So he's got his pregame move Rhino over there with some Retributors in it. Double 10 woman Zephyrim squads, triple Repentia, sort of normal Bloody Rose stuff. Morvenn Vahl plus Celestine, all the fun chicanery. I ended up, we were on Death and Zeal, I believe. So we had our quarter deployment, 5 objectives. I ended up, because I didn't need to screen anything out with the Gene Stealers, just place the Gene Stealers in the top corner there to hold down this objective. And then I have a Warrior Squad that can deploy safely and then kind of push that objective if I need it. What Kyle ended up doing, he's got a couple good Miracle Dice to start with, so he ended up pushing a Repentia Squad with Advance and Charge from a Repentia Superior on turn 1, because he got the first turn. And then I didn't take that many pictures, so awkward. He pushed your Repentia Squad over here, basically, to charge into the big Miracle Charge into the Gene Stealers and kill them, which is a little bit, you're trading a little bit dearly for the Repentia Squad, but I made the mistake of towing them on the objective, and that actually scored my opponent an additional victory point on the bonus point, which is, I think part of the reason that he pushed there. That is Death and Zeal, right? Oh no, it might be Conversion. Yeah, it is Death and Zeal. I nailed it. I'm so good at talking about games of Warhammer 40,000. He also put his a Zephyrim squad there to so the Repentia had come in and killed the Gene Stealers, and they were just sort of chilling on the objective. He had a Zephyrim squad hiding behind this wall here. So my game plan was to big boy advance the warrior unit over there that was going to be pushing towards this objective. I could kill the Repentia with random shooting and psychic powers and garbage like that, and then charge into the Zephyrim. This is my 5-man warrior squad, but I figured with Adrenal Surge and all the bonuses I could probably kill them. It's pretty likely, especially since I punched their Armor of Contempt with AP 3 pretty well, and then I could overrun back to screen out this corner with that unit on the top of 2. And unfortunately what happened was that I just failed my charge on the Zephyrim. It was a 6-inch charge. I have Augmented Ferocity, so +1/+2 charge. And it was just a 6-inch charge with a reroll, and I just flubbed it. So my stupid warriors ended up sitting there, eating a charge from the Zephyrim squad. And then a second Zephyrim squad came down in the back and charged the next unit of warriors down. So I was a little bit awkward from the get-go. Although my opponent did bail out a Retributor squad early and shoot it to warriors at the bottom corner here. And he rolled some of the worst dice I'd ever seen. He missed all but 2 times between 4 multi-meltas and a Cherub shot. And both of the times that he hit, he failed to wound. So, you win some, you lose some. It's not that bad. That did mean I was able to smite down the Retributor squad and then get my Sky Slashers to charge the Rhino to contest that objective. So we were both basically knocking each other down to 4-point primaries over the early game. Things kind of came to a head right around round 2. I had not popped an Imperative round 1. Because I wasn't sure how aggressive my opponent was going to be. I popped round 2 the 5+ invulnerable save, which ended up being good because I ate the charge back with the warrior squad that was on this objective, obviously, and then the Zephyrim squad came down and charged into this blue squad that's down here. And the 5+ invulnerable save actually ended up being a huge deal. My opponent wasn't really able to punch super well through them with the Zephyrim, only killed a couple with the first activation, and then I got to interrupt and blunt most of the second activation. And that actually saved a couple of the warriors on this objective, so I was able to get an 8-point turn. I then ran Tyrant around, blew everybody up on that objective, kept him there with the Tyrant Guard. The Tyrant Guard moved up and then charged around, basically, into the Zephyrim squad that was there. They ended up getting killed by random stuff. And then I big boy advanced the warrior squad onto the other side to take this objective as well. Double watching me, Steven? Thank you. I appreciate it. I greatly accept the double watching so much. Good stuff. So I should mention, I guess, there was a question earlier in the chat about secondary objectives for Tyranids, and I think I had good picks for secondary objectives in this game. I took Retrieve Nephilim, which is never great, but it's okay. The Warrior squads can do it, the Raveners can do it, even though they have to roll for it. And I have a Gargoyle squad that can do it, and the Gargoyles are kind of the important piece there, because they can do a quarter, and then the next turn they like bounce, and you do a quarter somewhere else, and then they bounce into your opponent's table edge, and you're locked in for 8 usually, and you can try to push for the 10 with your last turn. In the last turn, it's a little tough though. I took that one because I didn't have many other good ones, but then additionally I took Psychic Interrogation, and I took a very nice Cranial Feasting, which is phenomenal against Adeptus Sororitas. They have so many characters and so many unit champions, they have to play so aggressively at you that you get to score 1,000,000 points on Cranial Feasting, which is awesome. And I believe I ended up maxing both of those, or I think I got 4+ Denied on one interrogation, but that was it. The other interesting thing about 4+ Denied, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with a spoiler alert, a different matchup in the same tournament. The interesting thing about the 4+ Denied, if you're already overloading Psychic, is that you can play Psychic Interrogation into it because your opponent often has to hold up their deny for your interrogation, which means you get all your other spells off. Not to mention the fact that it eats their whole turn of command point generation every turn for only a 50-50 to stop yours. So you probably get like a 9-ish if they're 4+ denying every single time, but that means that you get all of your other psychic powers through their denies, which is like, oh, pretty good. So I actually kind of really like Psychic Interrogation into a faction that can deny it, if only because I have so much other psychic powers that are going to be going off. How do I think Emperor's Children stand in comparison to their 8th edition codex? Was able to blast your army off the table, but now have doubts. Yeah, I mean, I think the change for Emperor's Children was the same as I think basically all of the Heretic Astartes sub-factions, because the entire faction moved from being these like ranged combo-oriented units where you'd try to be like dropping Crimson Crown combos on people and Endless Cacophony combos on people, Remnant of the Meraviglia, all that garbage. And basically the focus of the entire faction moved from being that to just punching people in melee. And I think Emperor's Children are one of the better armies in melee. I don't think they're the best army in Heretic Astartes for melee, but they do sort of supplement that with being okay at shooting too. Whereas Creations of Bile, I think, just like literally pick them up and tear them into tiny pieces and then like sprinkle them around the battlefield. Creations of Bile have nothing to do with shooting basically whatsoever. Whereas Emperor's Children, you got a bunch of Marcus Slash guys. You can use the auto 6 strat on and stuff like that. So, you're definitely not going to be killing people with as much efficacy as you did in 8th, but that's true of all of the Heretic Astartes armies. And on the flip side, you're so much more deadly in melee that it's like probably fine. So you're just a big melee army now, for sure. I do think Noise Marines are still good though. If we're talking about Noise Marines specifically, I played Dutes on stream playing some Noise Marines the other day, and that VOD is not live yet. That's the 60 Tactical Marine VOD, but that should be live tomorrow, maybe, I think, over on the replay channel. And that game was fucking amazing. That game was sick, and he used a big brick of Noise Marines in that list, and that was awesome. He was playing Emperor's Children. Yeah, that game was super cool. 60 Tactical Marines, chat's a real list, I swear. Not really, but, it is what it is. So from there, because my opponent swung down in this game with the Zephyrum, he ended up basically electing to push super hard. So he clipped the Warrior squad over here out with a Repentia squad. He pushed Sacrosance into the middle. I had charged Celestine. Celestine was trying to fight the Venomthropes, but just killed one of them, I think, which is a little awkward. I tried to kill her with the I got the Zoanthropes around the corner to smite her, which ended up killing her. And then she respawned, and we had an interesting judge call because the judge ruled that when she respawned, she could rotate her base, which is important because where she was situated, her wings were like this. if you can imagine. Here's her little her body, and here's her head, and like here's her sword or whatever, and her other arm, and here's her legs. That's gorgeous. And then here's her wings. Woo. Which meant that I could cut this line of sight down here like that. The judge ruled that when she was replaced, she could rotate, which I don't agree with, but the judge is the judge. And I think it's open to interpretation, for sure. It's kind of a weird thing because you're not measuring distance, so it's like a question of whether or not rotational distance counts when you are replacing her on the battlefield. I have no idea. But that meant that she could actually rotate herself so that I could no longer see her wings. So she actually blocked a bunch of shooting, which was relevant because the Raveners left her on 1 hit point. So a little unfortunate there. I did clip out everything else I needed to, though. I took this objective away, and my opponent was really forced to push super far forward. From there, yeah, here's the fight of the century. From there, my opponent was kind of in a bad way, and we ended up closing the game out pretty quickly. He couldn't do anything about the Hive Tyrant over here, and I believe that the Hive Tyrant plus the remaining Warrior Brick and the Zoanthropes basically picked up everything in the middle. I shot most of the Repentia squad over here to death with random garbage, and I scored my 8 on Retrieve Nephilim with the Gargoyles coming back in. And from there, we basically just fast rolled it out until the end of the game, which ended up with me with a pretty narrow victory at the end of the day. I think I only won by 4 or 5 points. But that is, part of the benefit of playing Adeptus Sororitas is you have a lot of secondaries that can score really easily. So pretty good, feeling pretty good about getting a tough matchup out of the way. And this was certainly a difficult one because it was mostly a lot about, despite the fact that my Warriors failed their charge on turn 1, which would have been really good and it would have set me up really well for the remainder of the game, I was able to basically 5+ invulnerable save my way through, which was nice, felt pretty good. That brought me to round 2. I was playing against Heretic Astartes this game, and unfortunately for my opponent, Heretic Astartes were the reason I brought the second unit of Zoanthropes in my list. And we were on Data Scry Salvage this game, and I went first, which is always like a little bit funky. So I ended up, you can see I have a little bit of space here behind a ruin. I ended up with this warrior squad pushing forward on the first turn and taking this objective, shooting a couple models to death over here. My opponent sort of took over his objective that was behind this wall. But from there, that warrior squad didn't take enough damage to get killed because the rest of his models, which was basically all Terminators, by the way. He was playing Black Legion with 2 big, huge bricks of Terminators, a triplet of Obliterators, a couple additional smaller Legionary and Terminator squads to support, but mostly just slow big dudes. And that meant that he couldn't get to my warriors over here, so they were able to clear off this objective as well. I ended up taking no prisoners in Cranial Feasting and then Engage on all fronts this game, because Engage is usually pretty good on Data Scry Salvage, because you start in 3 table quarters. Obviously, the exclusion zone that you have now makes things a little bit awkward, but the fact that my entire army can score Engage rather than it cutting off when I start losing models is pretty all right. But from there, my opponent basically played super cagey because he was worried about the Zoanthropes hitting the Terminator units, which is, to be very fair, if he ever gets both Zoanthrop units on a Terminator brick, he loses like half of it immediately. But it meant that I basically scored all the primary objective points and he didn't. On the final turn, let's see if we have a look at the final turn here. Yeah, on the final turn, I had sent the Hive Tyrant into a Terminator brick that was hiding in the ruins back here. And then my opponent had his other Terminator brick sitting over here that had taken a little bit of attrition damage over the course of the game. So I pushed my Raveners forward to shoot at them. I pushed the Zoanthrope forward to smite them. And then I hit them with shooting and melee from a warrior squad. Dropped them down to only 2 models, which was unfortunate. And I was trying to kill the unit for the Cranial Feasting point. But on the flip side, I had also sent the Hive Tyrant into the brick in the middle here just to get additional no prisoners points. My opponent ended up interrupting and just one-shotting the Hive Tyrant right off the table. Which is fair. The Hive Tyrant wasn't actually worth any points in this game. He was so it was just upside for me if he actually killed any Terminators for no prisoners. But it was pretty funny. My poor Hive Tyrants this game, where I have actually been. They were pretty squishy, I think, as they typically are. But I think that was mostly a very bad matchup for my opponent. And he didn't really have a recourse besides to play it super cagey, except that he was never going to win on objectives if he played super cagey. So that ended up being what happened, essentially. And then we can talk about the last game, which is pretty wild. Get rid of Armor of Contempt. Wow, chat. Some really strong things to say about Armor of Contempt over here. I don't know, chat. Armor of Contempt, I think, has generally been very, very positive for the game. It does make, like... It makes AP1 significantly worse, and it makes light cover significantly better, but those are two stats that, like, they weren't that great to begin with. I think it's fine, you know? Having units that are difficult to kill in a game where everything, like, previously was hyper-lethal is fine. It's generally pretty good. So I think Armor of Contempt is great. Speaking of someone who doesn't play with Armor of Contempt, I think Armor of Contempt is fine. And you can find ways around it, right? Like, you could just push for mortal wounds, or you can push for high AP weapons, or, you know, you have to. It's a metagame consideration you have to build around. Anyway, this is the final game. We were playing on conversion this time, so we played both corner deployments, and I was up against Black Templars. I went first this game as well, so just like the second game, which ended up being a huge deal. And I was a little bit worried about this game. I was looking at the potential players that I could play against, and I was looking at this Black Templars list, and I was like, this is actually pretty bad for me, because my opponent had all of the technology to try to beat me. Not only is he Black Templars, so he has the 5 up against Mortals, which I was building a ton of, you know, Mortals into my list, but also he had a Calexis Assassin, so the 18-inch -2 to cast bubble, which I'm actually not that worried about, because I kind of like playing against Calexis Assassins because they make really good psychic interrogate targets, which is a little bit oxymoronic because they're supposed to be immune to psychic powers, but they're not, so, you know, they're not immune to that one somehow, so it works really well against them. And previously, back in the day, it used to be really good at wrapping, too, because it was really hard to kill them. So you could wrap them with a bunch of models, and they wouldn't die. And then they would just, like, kill 2 guys, and you'd be like, all right, cool, I'll kill you next turn. Less impactful now, because they just, like, Desperate Breakout, or your opponent just charges you, or whatever. But back in the day, that was what I liked to use them for. So I always liked it when my opponent took Calexis Assassins. But also, he had the litany of... Not Divine Protection. That's a 5+ damage ignore. It's the one that makes you immune to psychic powers, which is called Repugnance. Is that right? So something Repugnance. Fuck, damn, I forget the name. It is. Let's find out, chat. Let's find out together. It is. Excuse me. Plea of Deliverance. Deliverance is the name of the prayer. So he had 2 chaplains. One of the chaplains could pray immune to psychic powers, and he had a big brick of assault intercessors that he could basically ring his army with. And if he made them immune to psychic powers, like, probably 30% of the damage of my army immediately gets cut. So I was a little bit worried about that. So he had a pretty interesting list, actually. A huge brick of Eradicators, a big, I believe a 6-man of Eradicators, 2 big Crusader squads, and 1 Assault Intercessor squad. So 1 huge Crusader squad that was, I think, over 10 models. Plus a second... it might have been a second 10-man Assault Intercessor squad. So really kind of pushing for our... double fights here, as well as a big Inceptor brick and a brig. They're hiding behind the wall. You can't really see them, but a big Blade Guard veteran brick. So really super tanky. The 5 up against mortal wounds, situational, immune to psychic powers, and I was a little bit worried about how this game was going to go, chat, from the get-go. I ended up winning the roll to go first, which ended up being a big deal because my opponent put his huge brick of Crusaders right in the front of his army, basically. And because I was going first, it was going to be before my opponent's first command phase, so he didn't get the opportunity to pray with any of his chaplains, which meant that I could actually interact with that unit with all of the zone thropes on the first turn. So that's what I did. I peeked 1 zone thrope out one side of my ruin, 1 zone thrope out another side of my ruin to peek some line of sight. I think he's actually hiding behind this wall. But peeked some line of sight into a couple of intercessors that were chilling over here behind this wall. And then I brought out every single one of my warriors. The Raveners, unfortunately, couldn't get line of sight to anything, but they were just wandering around. But every warrior unit peeked out in order to fire into that squad. And I revealed the Tyranid Prime... what do you call it? Imperative to give exploding 6s to hit in the shooting phase and just let fly. And fortunately for me, I had some good dice on the gunshot, or on the warp lances with the zoanthropes. I had some good mortal wounds. My opponent didn't save too many of them. And then all of the venom cannons blasting into him, and my opponent rolling not too great on damage ignores from the chaplain, were able to clip out the entire squad, which was pretty wild, to be fair. I wasn't expecting to kill the whole thing, but I knew I needed to deal as much damage as possible before they became immune to a lot of my effects. So that was a huge start to the game. My opponent came back swinging. We actually basically mutually annihilated. This is not too far into the game. But my opponent brought forward the big brick of eradicators, fired into the warrior squad that I had brought out into the ruin, and just killed the entire thing. Just straight up threw -1 to hit. I had a catalyst on them. I -1 damaged them. But he had heavy melter rifles, which got through a lot of the -1 damage. I was hoping that would put me at a place where I could save a couple with catalyst, but with a 6-man eradicator squad, it was not going to save me, and that ended up killing the entire unit. So I lost a whole warrior squad for my trouble. The Inceptors also pushed up and shot into the Raveners and killed most of them, but not the entire unit. So we killed a ton of each other's models on the first battle round. Going into round 2, I did push forward with the another warrior squad. I knew that because I had 6-man warrior squads, or I had a 6-man warrior squad, the Inceptors were going to be very difficult to deal with, because if they ever got to shoot at me, they blasted. So both of their guns would turn to 3 shots, and they would shoot 6 shots apiece, which is pretty brutal. So I hit them with a couple smites. My opponent put the big Blade Guard veteran squad into the center. You can see the last guy in the squad over here, as well as and then dumped all of the defenses on them. So they got the Litany of Divine Protection and the Plea of Deliverance. Is that what we decided it was called? We did decide that. So they were going to be immune to psychic powers and have a 5+ damage ignore. They also had the icon, so one guy could reduce AP 2 to AP 0 on his Storm Shield, which was pretty solid as well. So he was going to be super tanky. And then they had the Champion of the Feast on their Sergeant in addition. So that squad was teched out to be as tough as possible. So I sent in the Warriors as well as the remaining Raveners into the Inceptors over here. I ended up putting a lot of the Warriors into the 10-man Assault Intercessor squad here. And I believe that I had, because I knew I needed to try to clip out as many of the Blade Guard veterans as possible, I called the Warrior Imperative for exploding 6s to hit. And that ended up going like gangbusters. So I fully charged the Warrior unit going into the Blade Guard veterans, because I knew I needed all the help I could get. But I didn't put any buffs on the squad going down into the bottom here. That said, I think I sent the majority of their attacks. I think I sent 4.5 warriors into that squad. And just with the exploding 6s, they actually ended up just clipping out the entire squad. Which was partially because they were outside of the Apothecary's aura, who was hiding in the back over here. But also, I just rolled like a friggin' god, so... Just dice my opponent, mostly. But it came back to bite me, for sure. So we had clipped out basically all of the Assault Intercessors besides the squad hiding in the back here, kind of randomly. The Inceptors did survive. The Raveners weren't able to kill them, but they did engage everything on the objective and try to... and ended up holding that. So I was trying to get my opponent down to a 4-point primary. But on the flip side, the Blade Guard veterans had actually survived the big supercharged warrior squad charging them. They were survived with the champion left on a couple of wounds, and I elected, the way it works is a little bit funky because of extended engagement range, which we were using for the event. My opponent had all his characters in the corner of this building right here, so you can imagine they were standing somewhere like this. And then he had his frontmost eradicator was back here, basically. So I knew I needed to touch the eradicators to prevent them from shooting again, because their last shot was absolutely destructive. So I elected to consolidate in. I had a warrior that had charged into somewhere around here, and I elected to consolidate in here to touch the eradicator squad in order to stop them from shooting me. But in order to do so, I had to walk into the 2-inch engagement range of all of the characters as well. And this proved to be a bad move, because between the Blade Guard veteran sergeant, the Eradicator squad themselves, and the 2 characters, they actually ended up killing the entire warrior unit. I had put Catalyst over here because I was expecting an interrupt to happen, but my opponent kept spending on 4+ denies. So he would try to deny my basically whichever Zoanthrope squad super smited, he would 4+ deny that. And starting at such low CP, that meant he didn't really have CP to spend over the rest of the game, which is pretty beneficial to me. It meant he didn't have interrupts open, but even with Catalyst, I might have survived this attack, but without the Catalyst, it was too much damage, and my saves were not good enough, and I ended up getting ripped off of the middle objective on my own turn. And after that, I was like, well, this is not going well. So we continued to basically just absolutely annihilate each other. My opponent pushed really far forward. I had he continued to push the Eradicators into the center and pick up units. I think the Eradicators actually turned around and just shot the Warriors away. They just clipped out the second Warrior squad, effectively, that were on my opponent's objective, so he was able to clear that. The Blade Guard Veteran just ran away and started getting resurrected by my opponent's Apothecary, which was a little upsetting. And I knew that I had to kill the Eradicator squad this turn. Now, my opponent also knew that, so he popped in a Aurelian Shroud that turn from the Apothecary to give them a 4+ invulnerable save, but I knew I had to fight them. And even though I got sort of pwned by the 2-inch engagement rule, the previous turn, I ended up using it chicanerously to my own advantage this turn. So I figured, I was hoping that the Hive Tyrant plus Venom Thropes, which aren't really that impacted by the 4+ invulnerable save, would be enough to clip out the Eradicator squad. I was hoping that I would get a little lucky with the Hive Tyrant's attacks, but even if I didn't, I had a backup plan, because what I ended up doing, my opponent had a model basically that had to come up and touch the edge of the terrain here so that the Blade Guard Veteran could run away. What that let me do is I sent in the Sky Slasher Swarms to eat the Overwatch. My opponent elected not to spend the CP to Overwatch. I then charged the model that was in the front. You can imagine he was right here. He was based by a Sky Slasher Swarm, and the Hive Tyrant charged him such that we could 2-inch engagement over the the piece of the terrain that he was fighting over. The Venom Thropes then went in to base everybody else on the other side, make a bunch of attacks. I ended up dealing a couple mortal wounds to one of them. I killed one of them in the charge phase with an impact attack, and then fought with the Hive Tyrant. And unfortunately basically did nothing. I think he killed maybe 2 models, which is very sad. I dumped all the CP, I did the impact attack, he has Maw Claws, so he was full rerolling, and I did the Adrenaline Surge for a bunch of extra attacks, and he just pinged, basically. My opponent then transhumaned against the Venom Thropes, and the Venom Thropes bounced as well, so it was not a great trade. But what that let me do was consolidate with my Hive Tyrant to just do a combat orbit around the Eradicator so that my engagement range was no longer being drawn over the terrain, which meant that he was no longer in engagement range of the Eradicator, and even though the squad was still there, he was free to run away, because our engagement ranges, now that we were being drawn over open terrain rather than the obscuring terrain, reduced to 1 inch, and I was no longer within 1 inch of him. So the Hive Tyrant at the end of the fight phase was just like, I'm freaking out of here, dude. This is bad. This is bad news. Now this turn as well, Helbrecht had moved up to this objective in order to try to clip out. I think he killed the remainder of the Raveners that were over there. So I had sent, as you can see, I think Helbrecht had run away at this point, but I had sent the Zoanthropes on a little mission, a secret mission, to try to do some smites into him. And one of them got 4+ denied. The other one hit. It impacted, but it didn't do that much damage, and I was a little bit sad. My opponent also pushed up. You can kind of see him below the terrain here. He pushed up the Calexis Assassin to engage the Hive Tyrant, who had pulled back to the Tyrant Guard back here. So he engaged the Hive Tyrant, so the Hive Tyrant was stuck, but I was going first, which is helpful, and I still had the Hive Tyrant's Imperative open. So on the subsequent turn, how we got to this game state, basically, was my opponent essentially just pushed forward, cleared all the stuff in the middle. One Sky Slasher Swarm survived somehow, but he killed all of the Venom Thropes and stuff. And sort of consolidated his position on his 3 objectives here. He did have banners, so he was trying to protect those objectives as much as possible to get that banner score up. But his other secondary objective 6 were a little bit awkward. He had Uphold Your Vows, which gave him 4 points every turn that he killed more in melee, which was usually pretty good. The turns where he was rolling, he would get 4 points pretty consistently, but every once in a while, the Hive Tyrant would go ham, and he would end up losing out 4 points on that. His last one was Bathe Your Blade in the Blood of the Foe, which I think I did a whole video on how I don't really like it as a secondary, and challenged the Hive Tyrant to kill him by the end of the game. If he killed him with Helbrecht in melee, he got 15 points, which is going to be a little bit tough. So I think that was maybe a little bit of an awkward secondary pick there. But he also got a benefit if he killed the Hive Tyrant because of Uphold Your Vows. So if he did kill him in melee, he would have gotten a whole boatload of points. But I was going to try as hard as I could to make that not happen, which is why we ran the F away the previous turn to keep that Hive Tyrant safe. The Hive Tyrant elected to, on the subsequent turn, use his imperative, so he was able to fall back in charge. He jumped over the Calexis Assassin. He killed the Eliminator squad that was remaining on this objective, so he cleared that objective off from my opponent, and then bounced back to be protected by all the Zoanthropes. The Zoanthropes went for a second shot on Helbrecht, and you can kind of see Helbrecht. He had moved up to the middle of the table, he gotten healed a little bit by the Apothecary, and then charged into the Venomthropes, and he's behind my opponent's hand now. There wasn't anything in front of him, and the Plea of Deliverance was, I think, on the Eradicators, I think, at that point. So he was open season for smiting, and I was like, all right, this is the turn. We got to get rid of Helbrecht. If we get rid of Helbrecht, we immediately can't max out Bathe Your Blade. And he's just like this huge melee threat we get rid of. So 2 big smites into Helbrecht, and I think we supered both of them. I rolled a total of 12 mortal wounds into him, and he made almost all of his damage ignores. He left Helbrecht on 3 at the end of the psychic phase, which is like sending me super hard. And I was like, this sucks so hard. But it's okay, because Helbrecht had pushed so far forward. If we open up ourselves up here, he was standing in this area of the table. The only model in front of him was the Calexis Assassin, which obviously is a below 10 win character, so it doesn't count for Look Out, Sir. So I had my Tyranid Prime in the back here, and I was like, all right, Tyranid Prime, it's your time to shine here, buddy. Just shoot Helbrecht directly in the face and deal the damage that the Zoanthropes couldn't. He rolled 3 shots, which I was very excited about. He rolled 3 hits, which I was very excited about. And then he rolled triple 1s to wound and did no damage to Helbrecht. And I was tearing my hair out at this point. I was envisioning the two Super Smash Bros, Helbrecht and this idiot Calexis Assassin, just rocking through my army. There's nothing I could do about it because they kept surviving mortal wounds. So I was having a lot of trouble at this point, and I was pretty sad about the game state. So as you can see, my opponent was pushing super far forward. He ended up getting Helbrecht and the Blade Guard veterans that had been healed back almost to full at this point by the Apothecary, although I did take no prisoners this game, so I was printing no prisoners points by those guys being regenerated, which was fine. Or at least I had already gotten no prisoners points for them, and I could potentially get them again. And they charged into the Zoanthropes and killed all but one of them for their impudence at trying to kill Helbrecht. Here's Helbrecht with his annoying 3 wounds left. What a jerk. But what ended up happening was that the Mr. Hive Tyrant over there, who had been standing in the middle of the formation of Zoanthropes, had to go for a big play. So I had taken Cranial Feasting, because it's a very good secondary against Space Marines. And my opponent had been holding the objective over here. You can sort of see them in the last picture. Didn't take very good pictures this game. I apologize, chat. But like I said, the games were really tight, so I ended up not taking enough pictures. He had his Bike Chaplain here, who's actually his Warlord. So he was worth an additional 3 on Cranial Feasting if I killed him in melee. There was also, in this corner of the ruin, a second, his Foot Chaplain. So I sensed an opportunity. I charged into some models over here with the Gene Stealers. They ended up killing the last Inceptor, actually, and then they fought the Intercessor squad that was over there. The Intercessor squad killed them down to 1 model. But in doing so, because this was the final round of the game, my opponent wasn't that worried about holding his home objective, which ended up being a little bit awkward because we realized slightly after the fact that he actually loses a point if your opponent controls your home objective at the end of your turn, which ended up mattering, I think. So the Gene Stealer ended up taking the objective, which then at the top of my opponent's next turn broke his home banner, which is unfortunate. And I was trying to find ways to not get the models back onto the objective or to make it as difficult as possible. So what I ended up doing is the Hive Tyrant jumped over everybody. With the 2-inch engagement, although I'm not sure he needed it actually where the models were positioned. He attacked both chaplains, and I had enough CP to just dump into them with Adrenal Surge and an Impact Attack. It did an Impact Attack to the, as well as a couple mortal wounds from the Psychic phase into the Bike Chaplain, split my attacks between the two, and ended up clipping both chaplains. So that was immediately a 9-point swing on Cranial Feasting, because it was 2 characters in melee for 3 each, plus the Warlord in melee. Woo, big deal. The Calexis Assassin had just continued to like wander around my objective and punch people for several damage. But I had the Prime there, so he could continue to direct guidance my Tyrant Guard. So +1 to hit, which gets a little bit around the 6+ weapon skill that the Calexis Assassin gives you. And over 3 rounds of combat, they were finally able to kill him. So he was another 3 points on Cranial Feasting. And then that was it. So I got 12 points in Cranial Feasting in 1 turn, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So the Hive Tyrant ran away over here with the hopes that he could prevent my opponent from holding that objective, because it would be really awkward for the Assault Intercessors to get back onto it, although I couldn't quite get it to the middle, basically, so I could threaten the Heroic Intervention. But what my opponent did was ended up, he came up with a cunning game plan to score enough points on his secondaries to come back into the game with his Bathe the Blood, Bathe his Blade, and Uphold Your Vows, which was to shoot the Eradicators into the Hive Tyrant and deal probably 10 damage to him, then try to clip him with the attacks from the Assault Intercessors. And if the Assault Intercessors did that, they would get 10 points for destroying the challenged character in melee, and then the additional bonus for destroying the enemy Warlord in melee from Uphold Your Vows. And very unfortunately for my opponent, they just killed him. These 4 Eradicators. They had 1 job, and I wasn't sure about the Assault Intercessors, like their chances in melee. Obviously, they're winning on 5s, which gets to be a little bit awkward. And my opponent and I were both relatively low on CP here because I kept burning CP to make the Hive Tyrant go zoom. And so we didn't have like a ton of leeway, effectively. And I think if I didn't take enough damage from the Eradicators, things could have gotten awkward. He needed to basically deal probably like 9 or 10 exactly. Then if he doesn't kill me with the Intercessors, the Hive Tyrant just kills the Intercessors. And I believe I was at a 14 on Cranial, so it would have maxed Cranial and gotten another no prisoners point. And prevented control of this objective, which I think would have cut my opponent down 4 primary. So it was a little bit of a dicey situation. If the Hive Tyrant doesn't die to the Intercessor charge, things go super duper south for my opponent. But it was basically his only way to get back in the game. Unfortunately for him, the Hive Tyrant just straight up took 12 damage and died. So, you know, every time my Hive Tyrant was attacked effectively over the course of the tournament, he just immediately vaporized. He was like, "I'm out of here, dude. I can't deal. I can't deal with this. I'm not getting paid enough for this stuff. I've already killed so many models in melee. We're done here." But with that, I was able to squeak the win by about I believe the differential wasn't that much. It was only about 7 points, but it would have been a 12-point swing if my opponent had killed the Hive Tyrant instead of a 5-point change. So I think my opponent would have been up 1 or 2 if he had killed the Hive Tyrant in melee with the Assault Intercessor squad. But he lost a bunch of it because it died on in the shooting phase. Absolutely wild, chat. Ridiculous game. I was convinced that, especially after basically every single unit I committed into didn't die, which is a little bit upsetting. Although, to be fair, I mean, they're probably like the tankiest that you can get Space Marines to be, between 4+ invulnerable saves and 5+ damage ignores. So I'm not that surprised that the units that I tried to kill in melee I didn't end up clipping out. I did get very lucky in the early game, to be fair, because I killed the 2 big Intercessor bricks on turn 1 and 2, which I think I paid for a little bit by not killing Helbrecht. And Helbrecht ended up coming in and clipping out basically an entire Zone Threat unit by himself. So The dice were a little funky, but I was feeling pretty bad at the point where Helbrecht survived a ton of attacks into him and didn't die. But fortunately, the Hive Tyrant being able to bring it back by killing all the chaplains was what got me there. But this game was absolutely sick, and I think especially for it, I mean, Space Marines are always going to be, you know, they're not the best army in the game for sure. But I do think that what makes the matchup much more interesting is the level of psychic protection against my army, which is very focused on psychic powers, which made things really cool. I did end up, I think, maxing out my psychic interrogation because the Calexis Assassin's just like a total chump at psychic interrogation. He did block a couple powers in the late game after he got onto my home objective and basically got all my psychers into his bubble. But the Resonance Barb guy, with Synaptic or with Warp Siphon, they almost auto casts the interrogation even inside his aura. So there's not basically there's very little he could do to try to stop that. And he did make the decision to block Super Smites over Psychic Interrogation, which meant that I had more victory points. But on the flip side, he also had more models alive, which I think probably ends up kind of equaling out by the end of the game. But anyway. That was my tournament chat. So we ended up 3-0. I took second place in the tournament, and it was some of the sweetest games I've seen in a long time. I was pretty excited about that game. Super impressed by the Black Templars for sure. Yeah, it was just cool to see like pretty solid Space Marines on the table for sure. Anyway, pretty good. How are we doing in the chat over there? I talked about that game for ages. Oof. Oh, Justin, my opponent from the last game is in the chat. What's up, dude? How's it going? Yeah, good. Thanks again for the good game. A little bit of a learning lesson on secondaries, yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think it definitely ended up being a secondary game at the end there, and being able to get like a huge swing on Cranial Feasting on the last turn was like, this is effectively what flipped it. But you had a good game plan to kill the Hive Tyrant with the Assault Intercessors. Like there was a comeback in the cards. It was just, you know, sort of low probability at that point. But what can you do when you're at that stage of the game? But yeah, I don't know what category Bathe Your Blade is in, but if it's in Purge, or if it's in No Mercy, then I think you just win if you take no prisoners instead. I'm gonna look real quick, chat. It is... Oh, it's Purge, just kidding. Yeah, so it would have been... No prisoners was probably, by the end of this game, like a 12er. Maybe a 13. I think it was a 12, probably. So you would have been like 4 points up, because you got 8 on Uphold Your Vows, I think. So it would have been like 4 points up if you picked that. But I guess the last pick is a little bit awkward, right? Because I don't give up many purges very well. I guess, I guess Unclean Idols probably the call. That's like at least an 8, right? So I think those picks probably give it to you. I agree. Ooh, good stuff. Yeah, that game was insane though, by the way. And so between that and the Sisters game round 1, I was like, I passed out after this event because those games were really stressful. So it was tough stuff. Anyway, yeah, good stuff. Did Bike Chaplain not have 10 Hauser Spawns? No, he did not have 10 Hauser Spawns. He had... I'm sure I can pull up the list real quick, chat. I don't believe that the Bike Chaplain had anything. I think most of the CP went into the unit upgrades. There was no CP remaining for additional relics at the at the end of that the pre-game phase there. My opponent ended up spending all of it. Yeah, so it was... Oh, he had Crusader's Helm, excuse me. So he could have had 10 Hauser's Bones. That would have made things much tougher. Although I think he still would have died. If I remember correctly, he took 3 mortals going in. So he only needed to take 4. No, maybe he would have survived. I think maybe the allocation becomes different. But it certainly makes it much less likely that he dies, for sure. Absolutely. That said, Crusader's Helm's really good, so, like, your pick is really tough there. Because you want to get that assault. That's the targeted assault doctrine, I believe, and expanded auras. I'm going to talk out my butt here about Black Templars a little bit real quick. It's so weird that relics are at the end of the codex, like what do you call this thing? Wikipedia? Crusader's Helm is expanded auras, and 1 person within 9 gets assault doctrine. Yay, I nailed it. I'm so good at this. Justin realized you should have picked Oath. Oh, maybe Oath. Maybe Oath. I don't have monsters for you to kill, so you don't. That one's like cut entirely, basically. Hold the Middle's fine, but it's only worth 1 VP a turn. So like you get 2 VP a turn from it. I guess it's a 10, right? It's like a probably really easy 10. Yeah, no, that's probably fine. Yeah, I guess Oath probably would have been the pick. Can you use CP to unhit a successful hit roll? Yes. Henrik, absolutely. And that's actually something that comes up relatively often. You can definitely use it to blank your own attacks. The awkward part is that I don't believe there was any CP left to spend at that point. And it's weird for eradicators, right? Because you want the hits to go through because they only attack like, you know, what, like 10 times. So you can't look a gift hit in the mouth, I guess. But in doing so, like you basically you would spend to underswing on damage, I think, if you were looking for to swing low there. I don't remember if there was a CP left there at the end. I don't believe that there was. But they could have maybe tried to swing lower on a damage roll. But the awkward part, right, is like it's such a dice roll. There was a 6 that did 8 from a heavy melter rifle, which it did end up killing him. If you swing low on that and you only deal 3, that's such a huge differential, and I don't think the assault intercessors kill the tyrant, and you just end up scoring more. But yeah. Why does the Calexos eat interrogation? Yeah, so interrogation doesn't target a character. Interrogation is an action that scores you points and potentially command points if a character is within range. And so he's just a character that's within 24 of the Psyker. So because he's not being targeted or affected by the power, it doesn't. His ability doesn't come into play. It's like a super bizarre interaction. Honestly, psychic interrogation should target a character. It shouldn't be like a weird pulse aura. It's super dumb. I don't like it. Are tournaments moving away from battle points as tiebreakers? For placement, RTTs are generally not. One-day tournaments typically will still use battle points as tiebreakers, but some of them are. Most of the GTs I've been to recently have not been using battle points as tiebreakers, though. They usually use win path. Pascal, what do I think about putting Maw-Claw on a Tervagon with Monstrous Hunger? Yeah, I think that combo's fine. I think it's always a little bit awkward not to put Adaptive Physiology on a Tervagon, or Adaptive Biology, because it's such a boatload of wounds, you really want the 5+. And I'm not convinced that like their Termagant protection is like actually enough to stop them from getting totally destroyed. So I'm not sure. Beldarin, any chance you can show a list and I can rip it apart? Yeah, you should do list reviews like as a dono thing. So if you drop a super chat, I will. There you go. Bathe the Blade, Unclean, Idols, and Oaths are the go-to? Oh, man, I don't. I'm going to be honest, chat. I don't think Bathe is ever the call. Unless your opponent is like Mortarion and you know they have to come at you. I don't think you ever take Blade, ever in a million years. It's like so difficult to get into a situation where your opponent is like, you have to be playing against an army where their enemy the enemy character has to move forward for them to get value out of it. But there's so many Smash characters now that are either like super cheap, like a lot of Heretic Astartes characters are like really cheap. So like you're like, Bathe, and they're like, all right, well he's a backline objective holder now for the rest of the game. And you're like, okay, cool, well, fuck, dang. Or you pick like a tanky character or like a super fast character, and they just play keep away all game. Like even you're just like, Abaddon or whatever, pick you. He's like, okay, well I'll just commit to round 5 so you can't one-shot me. And you're like, okay, well, sucks. Like I don't even know if like Silent King makes it in, because like Silent King never commits until like round 4 anyway. It's like I can't think of a character where it would make sense besides like maybe Mortarion. I think he's the one. I don't know. Eradicator's bad, Dev's good? I don't know, dude. Those Eradicators were fucking awesome in that list. So, I think it depends on, I mean, if you're in Iron Hands, for sure, Devastator's better. But they weren't in Iron Hands, so they were just sitting next to Hellbrook getting full rerolls and just wandering around the table with like, insane defensive profiles. So good. Any changes to my list? I actually haven't made any yet. And I'm like really happy with it right now, which is a little bit funky. I think it has enough tools that it plays into a wide variety of matchups, and like sometimes it gets a little skewed to Psychic, so sometimes you hit the hard counter, but it's so rare that I think it's fine. So right now I'm really happy with my list, yeah. Anyway, that is my tournament today. Let's talk about some lists and stuff. So we have some results from the last weekend that we can talk about. There's a couple. There are a couple of interesting lists from factions that we haven't really discussed previously, which I'm kind of excited to go over. But there's not too many. So a lot of this stuff is like, things that we're going to have talked about before. There are... Oh, it looks like some of these got incorrectly added here, chat. I apologize. So we have a lot of Necrons, obviously. I want to give a shout out. So Sod City GT is relatively close to my area. So some of the folks there are local to me. And Casey Glenn, I've actually played a ton of times on in games that I've talked about, I think, on the stream before. So he's a Necron player. Also plays Eldari. I've actually streamed him over on TacticalTortoise a couple times, I believe, with both Necrons and Eldari. So congratulations to him for going 6-2, getting 4th place at Salt City. Sam Procopio, we've talked about before, and I commentated him over at Motor City Mayhem. But yeah, super good Blood Angels player. But we also have some Heretic Astartes coming out here. Anthony Vanella taking with 701, so a tie on his record at Salt City with Heretic Astartes, which is cool. It was he's playing I think Emperor's Children. Yeah, he did have a Black Legion detachment with Abaddon, but I don't believe that actually counts as a Black Legion detachment. But we were talking about Emperor's Children a little bit earlier, and I think this is a pretty good example of what you can expect from an Emperor's Children list. It looks like my page is too short here to look at all of the units. What have I done? Come back. There it is. So the kind of core, I think, is always going to be the Dark Apostle and then the Chaos Terminator brick. So we just have Black Rune of Damnation on the Terminator champion. So the unit is -1 to be wounded, and the Dark Apostle chance Illusory Supplication at them every turn, and they get only hit on 4s, no rerolls. So they're basically like the Be'lakor Blessed Chaos Knight. It's like a whole unit of Be'lakors running around, so they're super tough to kill, and then fight first with all the benefits. Thanks to Mark of Slanesh, so they're fight first, +1 to hit in melee, I believe. No, we don't have an icon, just kidding. Unless I'm missing something, yeah. So at least just the fight first and then the Emperor's Children buffs. Ignore penalties, which is pretty good, because you can push combi the Power Fists, so like 2 Chain Fists, 4 Power Fists, and they ignore the -1 to hit because they're Emperor's Children. It's pretty sweet. Plus, if you fit combi weapons, which it doesn't look like we did, we just took Stormbolters on them, they also ignore the -1 to hit from double tapping the combi weapon, but I think for the most part we're just going to run them into the middle and stand around for a while, so the ranged output isn't that exciting. We do have a Havoc unit in the bottom with Mark of Slanesh to make use of the Slanesh auto 6 a dice roll strat with a bunch of las cannons. So if you convert a single las cannon for a CP, you have to pay the CP before they shoot, which is a little bit funky. But if you convert a las cannon, you can auto 6 the damage roll. And if things don't look great, you can just auto 6 the wound roll and force a save on them, which is okay. Am I going to cover the Salt Lake Open in August? Like, am I going to go there to cover it? That is... Salt Lake City is a little far away from me, so I would say probably... It's probably unlikely, but if the organizers want to hit me up and get me over there, then I would love to go. I'm trying to see if I can get to Nova. Nova's not super far away because we're in kind of the same geographical location. So I would love to set up a stream at Nova, but I know there's probably going to be a lot of other streams there, so that might be a little tough. And then there are several events happening in my area later this fall that I know I'm going to be streaming. But I don't have anything like, for the next couple weeks, I don't have anything on the docket right now. So we also have some other interesting lists. We have a Drukhari list, which is, I think, fascinatingly not the Army of Renown, so it's just sort of a standard Drukhari list. Double Hellions. It does have a Harlequin detachment, which is probably where a lot of that power is coming from. Although it's Skyweavers. Huh. Alright, well. This is actually super bizarre list. This was more interesting than I thought it was looking going in. So it's Drazar, double Raider, double Incubi in one detachment with 2 units of Rax for OBSEC. And then the second detachment, we have a Cult of Strife and Cabal of the Blackheart. So Cult of Strife for the Hellions and the Succubus, who is Precision Blows, Triptych Whips, the extra tech whip, and then 6's auto-convert into Mortal Wounds. So it's 2 super hardcore Smash characters, and then the Harlequin's attachment is just a Shadow Seer. And I wonder... Yeah, that's... Alright. I'll be honest, Chad, this is a bizarre list now I'm looking at it. Interesting. Alright. Sure. That's pretty cool. Good on Drukhari, I guess. Damian Flores Diaz. If you watch this video, hit me up about this Drukhari list because it's really interesting. And I want to congratulate you for going 5-0 with it because that's super sick. Lone Star Open obviously was this weekend. I made a video about it. Some awkwardness happening in this game here between Kevin and Robert. You can watch the video about that. It wasn't like hyper impactful. As some people were discussing in the comment section of that video, it did knock both of them out of contention for top 3 because we had 3 undefeated at the end of the game, the end of the day, which sucks. But top 5 is still probably like fine. interestingly, a bunch of recognizable names from the Tactical Tortoise community. I know Kit Smith Hannah, I've played before in pod games. Noah Benham and Colin McDade have also, I believe, all played in pod games over on the server. So exclamation point Discord if you want to join players of that caliber, I guess, playing some games. But that was won by Necrons, and I think an interesting takeaway from the top X of this event was that while the same factions start appearing in these like top 8 loadouts, we still see Necrons, which I think is to be expected. Tyranids are still ridiculously strong, so what a shocker. It's less concentrated in a single faction. We're starting to see some like percolations of new factions in there. So it's not that the transition yet has like knocked out any factions from contention, but what we are seeing is more factions like able to compete with these top ones, which I think is very good. That said, Necrons, probably Sororitas, certainly Tyranids probably need a little bit of a tap, because we are seeing them a lot. Summer Throwdown over here, double Tyranid players. A little bit sad. And then as we go down the list, obviously, tons of Adeptus Sororitas, tons of Tyranids, tons of Necrons. So, not too unsurprising, to be fair. Surprised he went Cult of Strife with Double Heli instead of the custom? Yeah, I do like the custom, but I think... Is Precision Blows locked to Cult of Strife? Or am I thinking of Competitive Edge? I might be thinking of Competitive Edge. Survey says it is definitely Competitive Edge. Yeah. But +1 to charge is fine. Like, I don't know. You get the entire Cult of Strife supplement, right? So, like, it's a question of like whether you want your like Hellion units to be slightly more efficient, or whether you want like a ton of new stratagems that you get to be super sweet. So I don't know. It's an open question for sure, and I think like that's fine as long as there's a reason to go either way. It's pretty good. But so the other thing I wanted to talk about is our more recent stats as well. So we can look at the lists that we are doing well all we want, but really we haven't really in this series or even this season talked about faction win rates right now, which I think is a pretty interesting discussion, because I'm not sure that it seems like there's a narrative, at least talking to people like around the community, that the Tyranid nerfs were enough to sort of like bring them down an appropriate amount, and I think clearly that's not the case, because Tyranids, this is Nephilim season only, so post update, Tyranids are still the #1 faction, full stop. Now, the thing that I do have to applaud here is that most of the factions are within the 40 to 60% range, so at least we're in like this 20% band in the center. But obviously what's going to happen is that these factions that are at the top level are going to be overrepresented, and the ones that are not are basically never going to see play, which is a little bit sad. Chaos Space Marines is really low, and I do wonder if there's a... because they're more recent than Nephilim, if there's like kind of a little bit of a delay, and we have some old school Chaos results popping in here. I want to give a shout out to, this is Mixed Imperium, I guess, not Astra Militarum. Astra Militarum sucks, yeah, 41%. But Mixed Imperium, dead 50, which is kind of fun. But obviously there's some standouts. I think Necrons are much lower than I expected them to be. Necrons, it seems like it's... I don't know how to feel about Necrons right now, chat. Because at least the data shows that like they're not destroying everyone, but they are good enough to like dominate when in a good player's hands, which is a little bit strange because that's not sort of how the faction feels when you see them on the table. I think that there's such a tension between attrition and being able to max your secondaries as a Necron player that you actually do have to be like very good at playing the objective game for Necrons to be good. And so I have to imagine that a lot of people pick them up because they saw the secondary objectives, but without really like taking into account how they were sort of going to convert 100%, which is a little bit funky. Yeah, so that's the other thing too, right? Is when we're talking about Tyranids, I know some people are pointing it out in the chat. That's High Fleet Leviathan here, the 61% win rate. So Tyranids as a whole, 59. We're below the 60% cut there, but Leviathan's at 61. And you know, chat, I as someone who's only playing Kraken right now, definitely do that. Just get rid of Leviathan. We don't need it. Or nerf it into the dirt. I don't know. Just let me keep playing Kraken because I love it so much. A lot of tournaments didn't run the new Chaos Space Marine Codex last weekend. This past weekend, I think they, for the most part, did, right? I'll post that link to the chart in the chat here momentarily, everybody. Let me do it. There it is. Boop. There's the chart. So you can check out all of the data yourself. And I know this is pretty interesting. It's a good source for data. I think you have to dive in a little bit yourself if you want kind of more. There's a lot of options here that we can sort of filter down the results. But I think that looking at specific matchups is a little bit tougher. Right? I mean, we can factor faction by faction, but if we want just broad strokes, I think this chart's pretty good. This data only tracks events using the new rules. Yeah, but does it only track events using new codex rules though? Because Chaos Space Marines came out post Nephilim, right? The updated CSM codex. Am I wrong about that? When did Chaos Space Marines come out? The 2nd of July. When did Nephilim release? Yeah, 1 week before, I guess. So it's not too much of a difference, to be fair. Although it definitely feels to me like Chaos Space Marines, like the Chaos Space Marine Codex is very difficult to play and be kind of straightforward. So it wouldn't be shocking to me that they would be they feel like a 50 to 55% faction rather than like one of these factions that's going to destroy people at the top of the rankings. 45 seems very low though. I'm not sure. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, maybe the best players haven't picked them up, and maybe there's like a little bit of a hobby delay. But 249 games is a ton, so who knows? Because Baz went to your first RTT this weekend, was smashed by Nurgle Demons first game. I'm sorry to hear that. Those pesky Nurgle Demons, sad boys. Oh, the weekend of the 15th, yes, for sure. Yeah, usually there's a 1 to 2 week delay usually on events using new rules, so I wouldn't be surprised that the new Chaos Space Marine Codex was even further delayed. Yeah, so there's probably still like a learning curve to the faction. I know the community's really divided on which sub faction is the best, and then on top of that, there's probably a delay on which events we're able to use the new codex. So I bet there's a little bit of a drag, and some of that score is maybe being reduced by the old codex. So Eldari is top, chat. But one thing that I'm not sure we can do here is look at individual lists, because Eldari is a super faction. It's not Azuryani. Oh, we can look at sub-faction breakdowns, actually. Oh, that's nice. Can we zoom out so I can see them? Nope, it's just cut off. All right, well, that's cool. That's less useful. Sure. So, there's a little bit of Hail of Doom in there, which is probably still percolating through because of rules cutoffs, maybe. We have the one player playing Cabal Cult Light. That it was Damian from this past weekend with a 100% win rate, throwing Eldari win rate up. But the sample size from Eldari themselves is really low. Only 31 games played. So that's like an average of like maybe 7 players. So I don't know if you can take too much stock from that. Actual, like pure Craft Worlds was almost 500 games at a 47% win rate. So I think we can probably safely say that actual Craft Worlds has been sort of dumpstered. And I think that's, to be fair, their changes were wild. They got hit every single which way. It was absolutely insane. They got like almost like just like a 60% of the data sheets in their codex went up in points cost, and they got their abilities nerfed, and they got their sub-faction nerfed. Crazy. So I don't think pure craft rolls are that high. That said, Harlequin's still sort of problematic, which as we're watching T5S2 games, you can kind of see a little bit. Their secondary objectives are really strong, and their shooting's really good. Their melee is fine, and they're a little bit squishy, obviously, once they get out of their transports, but otherwise that's okay. I think the real awkward part here for me is Necrons being so low, but that's probably a learning curve thing. Is it mostly Quinn's increasing the super faction ranking? Potentially for Eldari. I think I don't know how often you would see mixed Eldari if it weren't for Harlequins. I would hazard to guess that you don't see an Eldari super faction listing here at all if Harlequins didn't pop into it. But Harlequins themselves, like pure Harlequins, are listed separately and are doing extremely well, which I think that you would. Which I think is to be expected. Yeah, Tau back down as well. Tau and Craftware Delta are basically got the same treatment. The Tau changes has definitely felt a little bit over the top to me too. I was a little bit savage for them, especially because like Crisis Battlesuits, they didn't just get nerfed; they got kind of dumpstered. They got hit like 20 points. Kind of wild. But from there, I think we do see a little bit of an uptick for Orcs. We are seeing Orcs do a little bit better nowadays, which is good. X and O is still difficult for Orcs. They have a tough time pushing through that upper echelon of the metagame, but they beat, obviously they beat like 80% of the game right now, which is pretty good. And I think that's been where Orcs have been for a long time. They just get eclipsed by the top factions, but they've never been really bad. Looks like Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights, the most balanced factions ever created. Both at 50-50. That's pretty cute. Adeptus Custodes of 49. Which is interesting to me. Adeptus Custodes do feel a little bit weak to me, but it seems like they were probably hit an appropriate amount if we got them to basically the 50% win rate. So it looks like the only factions here are the ones we need to worry about. If this is correct, which is definitely the outlier to me, and I do think that Necrons probably need a nerf. We only have to worry about the factions listed here. And I'm wondering about this Drukhari pick, because the Drukhari... I wonder how many of these Drukhari lists also have Harlequins in them. Looks like it's mostly different lists, but that does make me very curious, because like pure Drukhari doesn't seem to me like it's particularly strong. The Army of Renown is certainly good. I'm willing to be proven wrong, but I guess we should be looking for like Prophets of Flash basically for Army of Renown. But the number one is a mix. It just seems like it's a bunch of different lists being played essentially. So I don't know whether that means that Drukhari is problematic currently, and I guess 55% is like pretty much the cutoff of being too good. But the interesting part to me is like Harlequins over Necrons for this number 3 pick here, this number 3 top slot. It seems like these 3 factions are the ones that need to get hit. Those are all pure Drukhari. Are Are they pure Drukhari, or are they just people who said that they're pure Drukhari? Ynnari also seem okay. Yeah, I think Ynnari are fine. They don't have like the... They're a little bit more straightforward than the other Eldari sub-factions because they just want to like punch you in melee, but they're really good at punching in melee. They don't do a ton of damage, but they're so tricky. It's like if Creations of Bile didn't do it, like did half as much damage but had the Incarn. You're like, well, that's pretty okay. What is the stat for Nids if you remove Leviathan from the equation? That's a good question. It looks like 50... It's about 100 and...
Not sure how to send my list to you. I have a link.
Belnaren. Yeah, you can just link it in chat. That's probably fine. Or you can shoot it to me on Discord too. Either one. So there's 120 games between 54 and 58%. So it's probably like 56, I guess? Like 55 and a half or something. So I guess it's mostly Leviathan. But to be fair, right, we're talking about 120 games versus 350 games played for pure Leviathan. And that seems like that's a lot. There's like a lot of sort of reporting bias towards Leviathan because it's already represented the best win rate, and the people who are already playing it are continuing to play it. And so like nobody's moving to the other factions, even though Behemoth has like a comparable win rate. All the people who are winning with Tyranids are playing Leviathan and not really incentivized to move out of that faction. But it does feel like if you hit Leviathan hard enough, they probably drop to like a 55%. Which is kind of crazy, right? Like a single sub-faction. And especially because it's not even just like the sub-faction, but I think Leviathan kind of dictates the builds that you play. And that single sub-faction is responsible alone for like 60% or like 6% of the faction win rate. They are just Leviathan is pushing it up by 6%. Wild. Absolutely insane. How would you fix Gene Stealer cults? That's a great question. I think... So we talked about them a little bit last week, but when we talked about an X1 Gene Stealer cult list, and I was under the impression that their secondary objective game was pretty strong, but their secondaries are actually not that good. I think like if you give Gene Stealer cult, super solid secondaries, I'm not saying Necron level, but 20% better than what they have right now, they're probably around this like 52% category here. They also didn't get any points cuts, and some of their stuff is a little bit expensive, so I could see that I don't think that there's a long way to go for Gene Stealer cult to be solid. They just need more numerous dudes and or better scoring. Like mechanically, I don't think they're broken or anything. Black Legion will be carrying all of Chaos Space Marines. Will it? I think it feels to me like Chaos Space Marines have a really wide variety of playable sub-factions. And I actually think Black Legion, maybe I'm biased, but it feels to me like Black Legion is probably the one I'm least scared about. Watching Creations of Bile play is like kind of terrifying. You just can't, like, it's a whole army you're just not allowed to engage in melee. They can just kill you. Emperor's Children is fine. Like, their threat ranges are insane. They're also very strong in melee. And Black Legion is like occasionally +1 to hit and gets reroll from Abaddon. Like, okay. Cool, I guess. That seems fine. Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised if we start to see people move away from Black Legion for Chaos Space Marines. I guess we can look at the win rates here. Yeah, Word Bearers are number 1. Or I guess Black Legion number 1. Word Bearers is most games played. World Eaters at 31%. Oh, you World Eaters memers out there. I feel sorry for you. And then Night Lords Iron Warriors also see play. No Creations of Bile in here. What's going on? Also no Emperor's Children? Is this up to date? Do I? Okay. Because you did have an undefeated Emperor's Children, right? Like, do they not show up? Are we just missing them? Bizarre. These numbers are super hokey to me, chat. I guess also like grain of salt, right? Because we have these like 32 World Eaters games with a 31% win rate, but that they're about to be superseded by a new codex. So like that's kind of funky. I don't know. Emperor's Children actually proven to be really good, yeah, for sure. And Honor the Prince is like a hell of a strat, right? It's not as good as it was previously because you have to use it before your charge instead of after. But now, but even so, it's still super solid. Does the meta seem like 50-50 shooting in melee? I would say rather than being like 50-50 shooting melee, I think that the meta encourages combined arms, which is, to be fair, how it should be. The downside there is like the factions that can do combined arms really well do very well. So like Harlequins, and it also, I think it also encourages speed too. So the super fast factions are really strong. Drukhari are a little bit melee focused for sure. And so are, I guess, Chaos Space Marines, but we were just talking about them, but they're not doing that well. But all of the Knight factions are pretty well balanced between shooting and melee. They're a little bit of a focus on shooting. Harlequins tend to do a little bit of shooting, but they also hit really hard in melee if they get to you. Adeptus Sororitas are like split right down the middle. There's Zephyrim and Repentia are really solid in melee, but also like if they don't take Retributors, they're leaving so much value on the table. And then Tyranids are similarly like, they're slanted towards melee, but also the entire army shoots guns, which is very important. So I think that the takeaway I would bring is that like your army should be able to do both. The downside is like we see Tau here down right 46%. Imperial Sport Raven Guard chat. Oh my god. Imperial Fists down here, like this faction that has no benefit to melee whatsoever. And a lot of the other Space Marine sub-factions really struggling. And I think that's because Space Marines do have, you know, despite the fact that they're supposed to be jack of all trades, they do have this huge emphasis on shooting. That their melee isn't good enough to overcome. They're off the side of the screen, except you can't see it, chat, I think, because the screen's moving. But when I click on Chaos Space Marines and I expand my screen size, it doesn't change. So I don't know. I guess I could zoom out, right? And then you could see. So like, the screen just ends here. Like, is there a side slider? Oh, there is. Oh, dang. I just didn't. There's 2 sliders to move the screen around. That's too many. All right, what are we at for Emperor's Children? 45, but only 30 games played. Low sample size. Same for Red Corsairs. Creations of Bile doing really poorly. That's surprising, chat. I don't understand. So much pain for Raven Guard? Yeah, Raven Guard they're just not consistent enough, I think. And it's a little sad because every time Games Workshop tries to print like a Raven Guard style faction, they make the exact same mistake. They're like, all forward deploy all the time, go, that's their thing. And you're like, but then it's just an Alpha Strike list. And if they don't go first, they lose. And if they go second, sometimes they still lose because that's how 40k works. So their win rate is always going to be less than 50%. You're like, it's just not good. It's just not good. Yeah. Well, I think it will be interesting to look in like 2 weeks, I think, at this Chaos Space Marine result, because it feels to me like we're still on a pretty low sample size, and a lot of the sub-faction and a lot of the reported statistics may be out of date. Especially like Iron Warriors. I guess you can play Iron Warriors in the new codex, but there's like so much Iron Warriors in the previous codex because they focused on the Obliterator combos and the Crimson Crown combos. So those may be outdated results. This World Eaters play is like bizarre. I guess just people who really like World Eaters, right? The like 6 people in the world who are really huge World Eater stans. Transhuman doesn't work against Venom Thropes if you're charging. You have the priority, and the 2+ poison still applies. I don't believe that that's correct, Manuel, because Transhuman overrides every other ability, because that's what it says. I don't think there's an active player priority for effects there. By the way, Baldarn, did you send me a link? No, doesn't look like you did. Maybe on Discord. I'm going to look at my Discord real quick. Yes, it was on Discord. Yay! All right, let me throw this in a thing. Oh, this is a wild list chat. All right. So I think this is a pretty good discussion so far. I think we've sort of identified the problem children in the metagame. But what I do want to, before we move off of the discussion, what I do want to iterate again is that we are no longer looking at this metagame that has like 60 and 70% win rates. So, you know, the thesis of the video is you know, whether or not Nephilim is balanced. And I don't think it is yet, but I do think that it's significantly more balanced than Nachtmund was, right? And I do think that it is probably the most balanced that we've seen in the game in a really long time. I think that we're like a half of a data slate away from having the game be in a really healthy spot from a balance standpoint. And I'm really excited about it. Like, going to events is actually pretty cool because you get to see all sorts of different factions, and like, they, you know, give you a hard time, which is nice. There are significantly less factions that are like just a pushover right now because a lot of them have like tricks that they can play to try to score secondary objectives. And I hope we see some benefits to our Space Marine brethren down here. Even Blood Angels, which are people who are like toting as the Space Marine like poster children, are doing super bad. Space Wolves, 42% win rate, super unfortunate. We do have Iron Hands up here. Iron Hands have like finally surpassed Blood Angels as the faction powerhouse that we always assumed they could be. Although they're being eclipsed by Salamanders actually, which is I appreciate. Promethean Creed is a hell of a drug, chat. That secondary is like ludicrous. So that's not too surprising to me. But they need some help because they are really struggling right now. You know, the worst faction of the game, I think, is at least this is the worst sub-faction, is our poor Raven Guard friends over here. They did win 1 out of 3 games against Tyranids. That's exciting. But they are just really super struggling. And Imperial Fists, as we've talked about many times before, just don't make any sense. Their sub-faction abilities are just worthless. But the vast majority of the rest of the game is within this you know, 20% cut right here, and we'd like to push the bottom up 5% and the top down 5%, and that would be good. I think that would be the way the game needs to be. Maybe some points cuts to Space Marines to push them back up into that 45 to 50% range. We points up Tyranids, maybe nerf Leviathan, F those guys. Do something about Harlequins and Sisters. I think the secondary objective play there probably too strong, and then I feel like we're in a pretty good spot. So I'm like super psyched about Nephilim chat. I know I talked about how I thought it was the best GT format, and I think I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of being vindicated a little bit because I'm having a really good time in it. Maybe that's because I play Tyranids, I don't know, but it also feels like there's so much actual competition between these top factions that I think it's pretty okay. All right, list review time. Let's do it. Boop. Get in there. Have we talked about how sad our Dark Angels friends are post losing TTL and Stubborn Defiance? Yeah, maybe. I think so. I agree with that. Saw a couple Jukari players on Wargames Line wounding on Tuesday against Transhuman. Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly a stretch to say that like the simultaneous effect rules supersede an ability that says that it supersedes every other ability. Like, I'm all for playing things rules as written to the point of insanity, but that seems like a little bit too much for me. Don't think the game should be judged based on secondary objectives. You think the game should be judged on the ability of the army to score those objectives? What's the difference? That's the Office like same picture meme. Like people don't like judge an army based on the printed words of the secondary objective. They base the army on its access to secondary objective victory points, which I think is totally fire. Like there are a lot of armies with one really good secondary, and I do think that Salamanders is one of them, right? We just talked about Salamanders. Promethean Creed is like a ridiculously strong secondary, but to be fair, it's only in like 60% of missions that it's really good, and their other two secondaries are going to be tough to pick. And I think it's the same for a lot of the Space Marine sub-factions, because they all there's several of them that have like one really good faction secondary, and then you kind of have to go fishing for the other two. But people aren't like, oh man, Necrons are really good because of Purge the Vermin. They're good because of the suite of secondaries that they score 100 points on every game. What are my favorite secondaries for Kraken builds? Just lock in Psychic Interrogation every matchup. Outside of like, I don't know, almost every matchup. Maybe Grey Knights, I would cut Psychic Interrogation. That one's really good in most matchups. Cranial Feasting is okay. Not into Necrons, unfortunately, which is like the big downside. But against like Sororitas, it's really good. Against Space Marines, it's really good. So those are the two that I mostly main. And then the third one's like kind of up in the air. And that's where things get a little bit tough for Tyranids, is that third secondary is really tough to get to. So if you can get a kill secondary off your opponent, like just Windmill Slam that. But otherwise, like Banners, if you can do it, is good. If you have like two home objectives, because Banners score so highly on the final round now, you can usually pull a 12 on Banners. And what was the other thing I was going to say? And retrieve Nephilim data if you don't have any other picks. Anyway, we're talking about Beldarin's list, so let's do that. All right. So it's a Territorial Instincts Jormungandr list. So we have light cover on everyone, and Territorial Instincts is OBSEC on the monsters, which is good. Anytime you're in the Lurk Biomorph sub-factions, it's usually where you're going to be pointed. We have a Hive Tyrant, Foot Hive Tyrant with Shard Gullet, Last Whip and Bone Sword, nice. Onslaught Paroxysm, sure. Neurothrope. Onslaught Catalyst, okay. I don't... is the plan to... Oh, we're double Hive Tyrant, alright. I like it. I like it a lot. With Reaper for Blitteraxe, that's fine. I like Maw Claws personally, but I think they like do basically the same damage essentially in most of the time. And sometimes you just get to kill Abaddon in one turn and feel good about yourself. Okay, I think that a lot of times you can cut the second Onslaught if you have it on the Neurothrope. Because if your Neurothrope is getting attacked, you are already losing the game. So, like, this power slot is kind of... you're, like, kind of wasted. So, usually... So, what do we have for Psychers right now? It's just the Hive Tyrant, the Zoanthrope unit, the Foot Tyrant, and the Neuro. Yeah, so the Neurothrope is your Onslaught bot. We also are breaking rule of 3 right now, chat. So that's you gotta fix that. Some of these should probably be Molochs. So that's piece of advice number 1 is don't break the rules. So the second Onslaught is kind of a waste of power because the Winged Hive Tyrant is probably doing a Psychic Interrogation or a Warp Ritual and then running away. Which means that, and then your Neurothrope is your Onslaught buddy, and your other Hive Tyrant gets to like arc spells into people. So I usually like to take like Paroxysm's good. You're usually casting Paroxysm on somebody in case they're going to charge you. And I like a nice Neuro Parasite. Because then you have a second cast of Neuroparasite if the Zoanthropes are doing something. And probably always give the Zoanthropes Neuroparasite if you have it. Because then if they don't have line of sight for a smite, they can arc a Neuroparasite, and they're +3 to cast it, which is good. What's rule of 3? It's that non-troop and dedicated transport units cannot be included in your army more than 3 times. Is the answer. So we have 5 Trigons, but you're only allowed to take 3. I don't dislike Molochs though, because you can, with Territorial Instincts, you can drop them on people's objective because they don't get deep strike screened. They just can't drop in engagement range. So you have to be a little bit worried about like extended engagement range if there's ruins around the objective. But other than that, you just place, oftentimes you can place the marker so that it clips 2 objectives, and your opponent has to like go out of their way to screen 2 separate places. Otherwise, you just take their objective away from them if they don't have OPSEC there. And it's a little bit dear, like it's 125 points to do that, but that's fine if that model is eating attacks for whatever else is coming up the table. So right now, I think if the plan is to, just as a general thought about the game plan of the list, if the plan is to deep strike all of the burrowers, which you are okay with, yeah. There's 5, but you have more than 5 on the ground. The problem is that your opponent's going to screen you super hard, so you need a way to punish the screen. And the Winged Hive Tyrant's good at it, but I feel like you want something else. So I would cut to like 1 to 2 Molochs and like 1 to 2 Trigons probably. And then take like, I think that Tyrannofexes are pretty okay in Jormungandr because they're a 2+ save, so with light cover they go to a 1, and they're a billion wounds to sit on an objective. You can probably take like Fleshborer Hive, and they're pretty good at fighting chaff that's screening you. Or you just take a Rupture Cannon and say whatever. That's also fine. But basically what we want, the game state that we want to create, right, is that you put like a bunch of Trigons in reserve, and your opponent goes, holy shit, I have to screen out my half of the table, otherwise I get boned by Trigons. You also want, I guess you have Shard Gullet, but I think I want like a couple warriors. So maybe that's what we cut the Trigon for, I don't know. But you want like a variety of Synapse creatures with guns so that you can ping people for Shard Gullets, or for Shard Lures when the Trigons pop up. So you want them to freak out about all your Trigons. So they screen out like their entire half of the table. And then you have units that are good at killing enemies. And I think this is another reason that I like Maklaus on the Winged Hive Tyrant, is that your opponent screens with like, say, 5 incursors or whatever. The Winged Hive Tyrant just goes and kills them and runs away. And if he has Maw Claws, he doesn't have to worry so much about defensive stratagems because he's full rerolling. And he gets +1 attack for the rest of the game because your opponent has done that. So you're basically just like taking value from your opponent in exchange for like threatening them with Trigons. And then like you hope that by turn 3 when they have to come in, your opponent has like either overextended themselves and is really bad, like doing very poorly on objectives because they have to screen so aggressively, or they're out of screens and then you can hit them. So like I said, the Hive Tyrant's really good at killing that screening stuff. The Harpies are fine at it, but they don't generally like want to be attacking it. And I think a lot of people are cutting Harpies or cutting the Venom Cannons on Harpies for the Stranglethorns just to save a ton of points. So if you need points, that's probably, like, the Stranglethorn Cannon is a fine profile. It's not so good into, like, Armor of Contempt and Cover anymore, but it's not the end of the world. The Harpies are also, they're a little bit anti-synergistic with Territorial Instincts because they don't control objectives, so they're not objective secured, but, like, the Harpie's just good, so, like, you can't be too upset about it. If all that stuff makes sense. Guess it's time for 2 Molochs then? Yeah. I do not dislike the Molochs in Lurk biomorphology subfactions because, like, they're kind of a threat. They're not hugely dangerous, like, because they're AP1, but they have 1,000 attacks. And and they do mortal wounds and stuff. And so your opponent like has to kill them when they pop out, and they basically, because you have so much control over where they place, they always do work when they pop out. They always contest an objective, and they always do damage to something. And then your opponent has to like turn a bunch of guns around and shoot them. And if they have to be doing that, if you have something else that they can draw fire from, that also helps. Which I guess would be the Harpies, to be fair. How many CP do you start with in this list? 4, is that right? No, because you buy two detachments, right? So it's 2 in the first detachment for the Synaptic Tendrils and Relic. I would also be considering a Resonance Barb on the Neurothrope, but I think it's less important. It usually like saves you a CP somewhere when you're casting Onslaught, but sometimes you still need it, so I don't know. And then you spend 1 for a Relic here, and... oh, this is an Outrider. Are we at Outrider plus Patrol? If you cut a Trigon down to Warriors, we can do double Patrol, and then you save a CP too. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6. So you're at 0 right now? Yeah, it's a little bit sad. If there's a way you can like hide Harpies in reserve too, that also helps, because you just like overload the reserves, which is pretty okay. Could you ditch the Flyrant and make it 1 detachment? You could. If you want to, like, playing like double Tyrant is like kind of an energy though. Like I feel like if you make a list with double Tyrant, it's because you want to play double Tyrant, I feel like. So I don't know. That would be kind of a transformative change, which I don't know is what we're going for. Yeah, the problem with like the plan of reserving your whole army is that you get super punished by like heavy screens. So you need, which is fine if you have a way to deal with the screens. Which, like I said, the Winged Hive Tyrant is like ridiculously good at. All the Winged Hive Tyrant wants your opponent to do is put idiots in the middle of the table so he gets to kill them for free. The 0 starting CP isn't the end of the world, but it does kind of suck. The biggest downside is that it eats all of the... it basically means you don't get any of the cool monster stratagems for the Trigons. So they can have like Transhuman and full rerolls and stuff like that, but all of that's turned off, because most of the time you just fuel the Winged Hive Tyrant with it. Which is fine. But it just kind of... It's like a little bit of lost efficiency, I guess. I have started with 0 CP before, yeah. I did do that. Yeah, I played a double Tyrant Kraken list that was at 0, which might even be worse because Kraken is pretty CP hungry. But I was running like Raveners, so it was less. Raveners don't have any strats, so they're just like running around. And it was like it sucked, but it was you played through it. It's probably better if you have if you like retool the Neurothrope and you expect to play defensive with the Hive Tyrant and cast your support powers with him. The problem is that like I kind of want, like you could maybe plan to do Catalyst Onslaught with the Gun Hive Tyrant and then play Resonance Barb and the Neurothrope and play him as a Psychic Interrogator, because the Resonance Barb plus Synaptic Tendrils gives you like a 60 or 70% chance to farm a CP off like lead 10. You need an 8 on 3d6 drop lowest, which is like... It's like a 35% to start with, and 3d6 drop lowest is usually like a 20-ish% bonus. So it's like a coin flip to farm a CP off lead 10. So it costs you 1 CP, but you usually get 3 to 4 back over the course of the game. So that's something to consider too. I've been playing 2 Neurothropes for that reason, which is like why I had those, but that's a little bit of a, that's a big change for sure. thoughts were to deep strike 3 of them, leave 2 on the battlefield to charge up. Yeah, the problem with I think you'll find that you have trouble with melee monsters in general that don't have like some sort of maneuver chicanery. Like the Hive Tyrants are good at it because you can't shoot them, right? Because they're going to be standing behind the Tyrant Guard or next to the Tyrant Guard, and then there's like some idiot body blocking for them. But the Trigons themselves are like just big dummies that can't go through walls. So you can't hide them, right? And they're only T7, like they're 14 wounds, and they're probably 4+ save on turn 1 if you call Zone Thrope Imperative. But there's no Venoms, right? We didn't have points for Venoms, yeah. So they're just like T7 idiots with a decent invuln. So your opponent basically gets 2 turns to shoot at them, because they probably aren't going to charge anything round 1. So it's not like they're not really like, you don't get any benefit really from them. They just give you your opponent something to shoot at. Like, and I guess if they're shooting at them, they're not shooting at the Harpies, but like I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that that's like enough of a threat really. Especially because the Harpies deploy so far back. Like if your opponent goes forward, the Trigons have to deploy on the line. And the Harpies sometimes don't get shot turn 1 because they can deploy at the back edge of your table. But if you deploy the Trigons at the back edge of your table, they just never get into the game. So your opponent's like, okay, I'll just kill those 2 things. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm like 300 points down now. This sucks. I guess like Haruspecs could drop on the table. Like a Haruspecs, if you want to just play a melee monster that stands there, is like probably the best option that you have. You could also play, like I said, that's why I recommended the Tyrannifex too, because he just has a big gun also. But that's specifically if you want to play monsters. You could just do the boring thing and like cut 2 Trigons for like a big huge warrior brick, which is good. Warriors are incredible, so I don't know. It's up to you. Yeah, 2+ save with a 4+ invuln is basically just a 4+ invuln. Like, the game just starts at AP2 right now, basically. You know, even like, you go up against another Tyranid army, right? And like, every gun is a Death Spitter, so every gun's putting you on your invuln save, even if you're at a 2+ armor. Which is just kind of converting really good efficiency into. Jonathan, double neuro is the shit? Yeah, dude. Yeah, bro. Double neurothrope is sick. I'm so sold on it. And even and sometimes you get to a situation where like your opponent's like, I don't have any characters, or I have like hyper psychic defense or something, and like you'll never score psychic interrogation, and you're like, all right, Neurothrope, like transform and roll out into the battle, Neurothrope, and he just like goes face into people, and he just like tags them with a 3+ invulnerable save, and they hit him with a Thunderhammer, and he takes 3 damage, and then he kills them and heals back to full. What a Chad of a unit that second Neurothrope is. He's so good. I feel like Warriors need to be Leviathan, not necessarily. Again, like, Warriors are... Jormungandr probably has the least synergy with Warriors, but Warriors, their data sheet's so strong to begin with that, like a 5-man of Warriors is just good in every situation. You know, they have good guns, and they have really good melee, and a lot of time... they're infantry, most importantly, so they can hide behind a wall. So, like, what you want to do, I guess if we're, like, looking at, like, a setup like this, right, like a US Open setup, if you have, like, your deployment zone, so you're deployed like this, right, like, you could put the Trigons back here, but they have a really long way to go to actually get to your opponent, whereas the Warriors can start behind the wall because they can move through it and they can access this objective immediately. So they can start in, like, these much more aggressive positions. And then they shard lure for your deep strikers because they're synapse creatures with guns, and they can play kind of a yo-yo game if they want to around the terrain that Trigons just can't do because Trigons can't go back through these walls. I definitely wouldn't take like the 9-man warrior bricks outside of Leviathan. That's for sure. I don't like, they're not resilient enough outside Levy. But like you will not feel bad about taking like a 5 or a 6-man for sure. Or even just like 3x3s with Venom Cannons is fine. Well, he can't Trampling Charge, unfortunately, right? The Horned Chitin keyword actually doesn't do anything for that guy. Because you have to be a monster to trampoline charge. If he could, though, he would be so dumb. That would be so good. So good. Yeah. Hive Tendril Monster, unfortunately, for the old trample charge. Sag. Yeah, could you imagine, though? The dude busts out, like, he's got his 3d6 drop lowest +2 to cast smite, so he probably super smites you, and then he psychic screams you. And then you get hit by, like, the 2 zone throw units that are escorting him smiting, and then everyone's back up to full wounds at the end of that, and then he, like, charges and he hits you for another 5. That would be incredible if he did that, but... instead, he's just, like, he's just a little tank. Yeah, I love that guy. Love, love, love. The second Neurothrope. Or the alternative is that he gets you 15 points and 5 victory points, or like 15 victory points and 5 CP, and just stands there for the entire game. Plus, the other thing about the second one is that you get to play more fast and loose with your, like, you don't need to expose your onslaught guy. So I actually only have onslaught on the support Neuro in my list. Because the second Neuro gets to play like super aggro, and if you kill him, like the Hive Tyrant just takes over for him. And it's less efficient because you lose the Hive Tyrant's output, but he's like so hard to kill that you have to overextend to kill him anyway. So if your opponent's like, oh, I could charge him, and you're like, yeah, but you're probably charging into a Venom Thrope aura, and he's like impossible to remove. And if you don't remove him, he just heals back to full. It's really stupid. Well, Beldarin, I hope that was an informative discussion about your list. I do think it's like a fun meme list. I do think like the Burrow Week skew is pretty good. But again, like you have to... The Molochs are good for scenario disruption, but they don't really deal that much damage. You're kind of leaning on the Trigons to threaten your opponent, and you have to have a way to prevent them from... Or to punish them for screening out the Trigons. That would be like what I would be thinking about doing most often. But anyway, I think I'm going to go ahead and team things out there. We talked a lot about stuff. We talked about a tournament. We talked about all of the results from the last weekend. We talked about faction win rates right now and the health of the faction. And I think I'm gonna be honest, chat. I think Nephilim is awesome. I'm so into it, and I'm having a great time with it. And I hope that everyone else has a great time because we are gonna be friggin' streaming the Invitational this weekend. We're on second Neuro with Paroxysm Parasite for going on offense. Yeah, I run Scream. I don't remember what my second is. He always just smites, I think, generally speaking. I might run Neuro Parasite for sure. Yeah. All right, chats. I'm going to go ahead and log things out here. But thanks, everyone, for watching. Remember to stay tuned for new content. If you're a channel member or a patron, there's going to be some new advanced tactics this week. Don't forget to tune into the Invitational. That's starting at 9 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time on Saturday. We're running through 2 games Saturday and then finals game on Sunday. Time TBD on that one. It's going to be some of the best games of 40k streamed on the channel every 6 months, which is sweet. And I'm super pumped for it. So I hope you are too. TTS40k.com/invitational if you want more info about that. But that's what's going on this weekend here at Tactical Tortoise HQ. And otherwise, yeah, I'll see you. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for chilling.